Welcome to the ColdCast, the northernmost podcast in the world. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast series where we, throughout 8 episodes, will give you an insight to the exciting research that goes on at the University Centre in Svalbard, or Unis as we like to call it. You will meet professors and students who are passionate about their cold climate research and learn more about the Arctic, both as a field of study, but also as a place people call home. My name is Maria Philippa Rossi and I am your host today. In a previous episode, we talked to Pernille Brunken-Eidesen about FieldPass, a project testing and developing alternative assessment methods for practical skills and generic competences. And today we welcome Maria Jensen and Steve Coulson to the podcast studio. Maria is a department leader in the Arctic Geology Department and Steve is a department leader in the Arctic Biology Department. And they are involved with 2 centres of excellence in education where Unis is a partner. So first of all, welcome, and maybe you could explain what is the Centre of Excellence in Education?
It's really a project where we're looking to see how we can improve our teaching, but also develop new techniques and new ways to teach students and to improve their learning, and really move away from the old-fashioned concept of one-way delivery in lectures and lecture theatres. So what we're trying to do in the bioCEED project, and I'm sure it's the same in iEarth as well, is to see how we can make our teaching better. But also, like I say, perhaps move away from the how do we teach, but what should a biological education consist of? And so this is what we're trying to do in the Centre of Excellence. Who
decides what is good teaching? How do you work on developing that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the main outcomes of the bioCEED project, certainly at Unis, has been this collegial approach to teaching. So when I first started at Unis way back in about 2006, teachers were given a course to develop and to teach, and it was really their responsibility. They decided how to teach it, what fieldwork would be done, and led the whole course. What we're trying to get away from now is to sort of develop teaching teams, or if not exactly a team, but get staff to talk to each other and discuss what works well and what doesn't work so well. But then to go beyond that, we actually use the students as sort of test rabbits to get their feedback on how they feel they're doing and how the new systems maybe motivate or engage the students in their work. And to this end, we have a lot of student-led projects as well, where we try to get the students to actually take some responsibility, but also try and develop their enthusiasm for what it is they're actually studying.
You mentioned bioCEED and iEarth. That's names of the 2 centres at Unis. Maria, do you care to elaborate what iEarth is and what's their focus?
iEarth is the Centre for Integrated Earth Science Education. And like Steve said, part of the mission is not only how we teach, but also what we teach. So it's shaping also the future of geoscience, earth science programs in Norway. We have 4 of the Norwegian universities, including Unis, involved in this. So it's also the University of Oslo, it's the University of Bergen, and it's the University of Tromsø. And the whole project and idea has been developed as collaboration between these 4 institutes. And the idea was that geoscience it's a very changing environment for the geosciences, because we used to educate a lot of petroleum geologists, especially in Norway. And the modern job market for geologists is very different than it was for 10, 15 years ago. And so the underlying idea was to use new teaching methods and to change our whole curriculum in a more modern sense towards educating modern geoscientists that a modern society needs. And the whole idea of the Centres of Excellence, more broadly than what these 2 Centres of Excellence are, is to actually fund initiatives, high-quality initiatives for teaching and learning at universities more broadly. So these 2 that we have here at Unis are just 2 of these kinds of programs. So this is competitive funding, and it's very big programs. They're funded in 5 plus potentially 5 more years. So it's long-term programs, and they are equivalent to the Centres of Excellence in research that exist in Norwegian funding programs. So it's big initiatives that people work on for a long time to actually have to come to the institutions, and they win the funding through competitive bidding.
What has it meant for Unis to be a part of these collaborations?
I think it has fundamentally changed the way we think about teaching. And since bioCEED was first here think bioCEED has actually implemented a lot of the structures that we also use from day to day at Unis now, also structures that are implemented in the study administration. For example, how it's quantify the time students spend on their studies, the time teachers spend on teaching and learning, assessing the quality of their learning, not just how much they like the teacher, the way we have students give feedback, and the way we have a collegial culture, as Steve was saying. For example, we have the annual learning forum. That was something that was initially developed in collaboration with bioCEED.
Do the Centres of Excellence in Education aid the dissemination of research and science to the public or to the local society? Is there a cooperation there?
To some degree. It's not the main aim to the local society in a traditional outreach sense. But for example, iEarth has a package, part of iEarth, that is about the employers that our students will eventually meet and developing collaboration with them. So under that, we have, for example, alumni programs. So we have Unis Arctic Geology alumni organization now that also aims at talking to the employers where our students will end up and hear more about also former Unis students, what they have actually learned at Unis in addition to their scientific content, but what kind of life skills they come away with that have helped them in the job market. So more of an industry contact than a society contact.
And bioCEED has a few sub-programs, Unis Sprout, Bio Breakfast. What are they?
The bioCEED program has a whole series of different projects, and some of them are located in Bergen, at University of Bergen, and others are sort of between both Unis and Bergen. And here at Unis, we have several which are sort of specialised for our students, and we have things like the Unis Breakfast. This started off as the Bio Breakfast. And it's really a gathering point for students a couple of times each semester where they get the opportunity to deliver what sort of research they're doing. So it can be PhD students or masters talking to bachelor students. It's a sort of forum for them to explain why they find biology exciting and what they want to do in the future. And it works very well. It's now been rebranded as Unis Breakfast because it's basically open to all students at Unis, not just biology students. And it's now a project which is run jointly together with iEarth. So that's why it's now become Unis Breakfast. But there are other little projects as well, which try to get students involved in what we actually do. So, for example, there's one called Unis Sprout. And this is a way for students to sign up for up to 40 hours research time with a proper research project. So here we're getting bachelor students who very often have no contact with real science and real researchers. And it gives them the opportunity to actually get involved in something where the outcomes are perhaps not really known. We have predictions and we know what we might get, but it's not the same as a student project where most students really can work out what the result of their project is going to be before they start. This is genuine science, and it shows them the problems of real science, the pitfalls, but also gives them that excitement of learning something that is completely new. And again, this is something which started off in Bergen as BioSpire. But again, because it's at Unis and we are talking about students who are beyond just biologists, it's now been renamed as Unis Sprout. And then lots of other projects like Scope Conference, which students lead themselves, and that runs once a year. So there's a lot of activities which we try to get the students actually to do themselves.
What's the feedback from the students?
We generally get very good feedback. I think they find it very exciting to be in contact with people who are actually doing something new. And getting them out into the field and seeing what it is we do is a very important part of the education, because anybody can sit in a lecture theatre anywhere in the world and learn about the Arctic. It's very important that we actually get the students out into the Arctic nature, show them what it's like to be a genuine scientist, and not just try and glorify it, but actually sort of show them how hard it is, but also how rewarding it can be.
And their Unis is in a special position, having fieldwork basically outside our doorstep.
Yeah, but basically we don't teach any courses which could be taught at other universities. We only have courses which are based on the Arctic.
The funding and the project length, is there a start and a finish, or is it something that can continue on? What will you do when it finishes?
If we're talking about bioCEED now, because we're the one that's been running the longest, we're now towards the end of our second term. So at the end of this year, bioCEED will have been running for 10 years. Unfortunately, the funding source will only cover 2 periods of 5 years. So this means that the bioCEED project funding finishes this year. However, Bergen have committed to continue funding quite a lot of the activities. And again, here at Unis, we are working to find ways to actually maintain the initiatives that we've started. And at the moment, we're working on a continuation plan of how we can do this. And I think for most of the projects, certainly the student-led projects, the actual financial investment is not that great. It's more to get the staff involved and to ensure there's continuity, because one of the challenges we have at Unis is that generally our student cohort is new every semester. So we don't get the same continuation that you get at a mainland university where students are basically there for 3 to 4 years. So that's our biggest challenge actually for the continuation.
And I guess you can use the experiences from the past 10 years and bring on into the future regardless.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're trying to do now is we've developed a whole range of tools. So we have these things that we've spoken about now in this breakfast, but we also have the virtual field guides. We have the sort of field certification systems that we've developed from Field Pass. They're all in place, or at least they're coming online now. So for us, it's more a case of trying to maintain the momentum. But since we have an active collegial environment, as we say now, I don't think this is going to be a big problem. And certainly there is a commitment from Unis leadership to assist with this.
When did the iEarth start, and how long is it running for?
iEarth started in 2020, in June 2020. So we are almost running for 3 years now. So we're coming up for renewal for the next 5-year period. That work is starting, but it's an application process. So we'll see, but we hope that we get to continue, of course. And we have, of course, also, we have inherited some of these activities through bioCEED and started collaboration with bioCEED. And then this being 2 centers of excellence in the same institution has, of course, also been really valuable because, as we said in the beginning, the centers had slightly different approaches or slightly different thoughts of what they wanted to achieve. But together, this has consolidated into some activities that we have here at Unis. And we have a lot, what they really have in common is that they have a lot of student-led activities and that students are much more active in shaping their own education, not only through feedback, but also through, for example, the Scope conference. And we have a teaching assistant program where we try to educate teaching assistants for being better teaching assistants, and teaching assistants are also often students or PhD students. So we're also trying to let these skills not just land with the permanent faculty, but also seep through the entire organization and have students as equivalent, as partners where we work with them to develop their education.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, Steve, that there's a not necessarily high turnover, but there's a lot of new students every semester. So by teaching a new class every semester, you basically help the mainland universities as well.
Yes, of course, and abroad. So the idea of at least iEarth, probably also bioCEED, but of iEarth is to be almost nationwide, so it cover a large part of geoscience education in Norway. So that means that some of these students have been exposed to then the more field-based part here. So we have different responsibilities in the project or program, and Unis has the responsibility of field-based education, which is natural from how we teach. But we do not only work with field-based education at Unis, but also to the mainland. And of course, some of the experience that we develop primarily here with the people who work here, or the students who are here, will then also be used at the mainland. For example, we have worked a lot with what we call virtual outcrops and virtual field guides. Steve also mentioned it, but in geology and in geoscience in general, you have to go out and look at the landscape, and that can be expensive, or it can be difficult to do in all seasons, or for practical reasons. For some students, it's a problem in terms of accessibility. So bringing these sites virtually into the classroom is also a way of teaching field science in a more accessible way. or supplementing the work we do in the field. So we're, for example, also studying how these tools play together with what we do in the field if we actually go in the field. So how they can prepare better to meet the field sites, for example, and learn more during the hours that we decide to invest in having students out in the field.
Where does the idea of educational quality come from?
It's been a tendency in international academia for at least 30 years that teaching is not just one-way delivery of lectures, but that's actually not how people learn well. And of course, the field of education and teaching and learning is more broadly, not just in higher education, has of course been a field of study for hundreds of years. But in higher education, it's a slightly newer thing that these principles that work in general for how people learn, that they actually also apply to young adults taking university education. And I think here in Norway, it has really been boosted by these Centers of Excellence programs that have brought it into the institutions and also brought ownership of it into the institutions. Of course, also general requirements of taking pedagogical qualifications by teachers. So in iEarth, for example, we're part of also an international community. So we also have adjunct professors that are associated with iEarth and that are our academic collegium that comes more from the pedagogic and didactic side of things and usually work at other institutions, but in departments where that is their primary qualification. And we also have PhD students. We have one PhD student here at Unis, for example, who is doing a geoscience didactics type of project where he's studying virtual learning tools for geology.
Yeah, and I think it's very much the same with bioCEED as well. bioCEED has several focus areas, and one is, in fact, teaching culture and social activities, these scholarship of teaching and learning. And what we try to do is, from a very sort of scientific basis, assess how our learning delivery, how teaching is received by the students, and does it actually improve their learning outcomes and their experiences being at Unis. And to this end, we have developed teaching courses for our staff to take, both faculty staff, but also these teaching assistant courses, which are primarily aimed at PhD students. But we also actually use the students as sort of test rabbits and see how our teaching can be better. And to this end, we are quite active in these social activities. And I think bioCEED now has over 30 papers in scientific journals. So the staff are testing, they're developing, and they implement immediately. And this is one of the great advantages of these Centres for Excellence in Teaching, is that the staff that are actually doing the research are those staff who will be implementing that research. So the turnaround time is very fast.
Yeah, we also have publications coming out of iEarth a little younger, so we haven't published quite as much. But just last year, we had 4 publications from iEarth coming out. And this year, we've also already had one.
Fantastic. How is the training or the development for the teaching staff?
We have an annual learning forum here at Unis that started with bioCEED several years ago. And through iEarth, we also have monthly or sometimes more frequently digital learning forums where we meet online. And that was, of course, a natural platform to develop when we started, since we started in June 2020. But that has caught on and we have kept it. So these are information. Sometimes it's outside experts. Sometimes it's some of ourselves sharing what we learn through iEarth activities. And often also with a discussion part in the end. So these are very effective communication forms. And then we, of course, also participate in conferences and present our work. But a lot of the iEarth funding is directed to small projects that teachers or students can apply for to start projects in their own classrooms or in the field, or to do small activities to test. For example, it could be an assessment method, it could be a new activity, it could be creating virtual guide of something, or it could be to test how something that's already implemented, how well it actually functions. So what do we get for the quality development that we do?
But it's all very hands-on.
It's very hands-on, and many of the projects are also applied for by students.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for participating. And this is the last episode of the first season of the ColdCast. Technician Simen Salomonsen Hjelle and we would like to extend our gratitude to the Norwegian Research Council for financial support of this podcast. And we would also like to thank students and colleagues at Unis for participating, and you as a listener for tuning in, wanting to learn more about science in the Arctic. If you haven't been through the other episodes, make sure you have a listen and stay tuned for bonus episodes and extra material published on this channel. Thank you very much.